professor Cashmore, Ellis Cashmore, parlerà domani mattina a Modena della celebrità sportiva. Gli diamo il benvenuto, questo è il suo primo festival ed è come sempre ed è un gradito ospite. La prima domanda è: cos'è una celebrità sportiva? In cosa è diversa dalle altre celebrità?
I think what's happened over the past several years is that sport and entertainment have come together, the two industries, and that entertainment, show business, has absorbed sport, and so that what we used to, in years gone by, call heroes of sport have been made into celebrities. So, for example, people like David Beckham, who is the model of the sports celebrity, he created, in many ways, a new template, an exemplary human being, a model on which others would build. And so practically any outstanding sportsman or woman nowadays, Andrea Pirlo or Mario Balotelli, these are celebrities now, not just players. And as if we need proof of that, they sign contracts with corporations, not simply the likes of Nike or Adidas, but with Coca-Cola and sunglasses, with any corporate sponsor. So the advertisers love sports figures because they are prominent, they are often likable or very dislikable, doesn't matter, as long as we engage. And we, the consumers, the fans, the audience, the people who buy products, do engage with the figures we see on the football field or in the boxing ring or on the basketball court or on the rugby field. We engage with them, we relate to them, we identify with them. And that is beautiful for advertisers, because they know when they see their images or their names, we immediately strike up an identification with them. And that helps us spend our money on the products that they endorse or which are licensed to them, which in some way bear their imprimatur, their brand, in other words. And as I say, Beckham, I think, was the first prominent figure who was able to do this. He became known as much for his adventures off the field of play as on the football field. And so many others have followed nowadays. So this is a long, long way of answering your question, what is a celebrity athlete? But there is no easy way to understand it. I think we have to appreciate that sport has become part of show business, and that the figures, the players, the competitors are not just competitors, they are entertainers.
Grazie. Lei, oltre a un libro su David Beckham, ha scritto anche un libro su Mike Tyson. Sono due modelli opposti, direi, di celebrità sportiva.
They are almost extreme cases. Beckham, of course, was a good guy. He was seen as a wholesome, clean-living man. He married a pop star, became a family man, a metrosexual. And let me explain what I mean by a metrosexual. A man who took pride in his appearance, who did practices that would perhaps be ordinarily associated in years gone by with women. You know, he took care of his hair, his nails, tattoos, wore fashionable clothes, but they were no longer seen as effeminate when Beckham did them. So he was a new exemplary man, a new man, and with a capital N and a capital M, new man. And people warmed to him, they liked him, loved him in many parts of the world. I think the word I would use is adore Beckham. Tyson, on the other hand, was an African American, of course, who came up from a a dysfunctional family background in poverty, and could do nothing, no education, apart from do one thing. He could fight. That's all he could do, nothing else. Barely literate. And yet he used his fists to get out of poverty and became stupendously wealthy. He was exploited by very many people along his career and ultimately ended up completely broke, bankrupt. But he earned an awful lot of money. So in a sense, he was what Americans call the rags to riches story. A perfect example of a ghetto child who became almost a billionaire in dollar terms. And yet, Tyson's example is interesting because people will point to him and say he couldn't handle it. He was an African American who had the world at his feet, probably one of the most famous men in the world. And yet, he reverted back to a more primal state, a more less civilized state. He regressed, is the word, regressed. And for a racist in America, he was perfect. And what I mean by this is that obviously there are a great many white racists in America today. We know that. We cannot fool anybody. We know there is an African American president of the United States and a great many high-profile African American entertainers in show business and sport, and a great many extremely rich black sportsmen. I mean, the richest of them all at the moment, of course, is Floyd Mayweather, who has a $200 million contract with Showtime TV. But I think that lurking in the mind of a racist is that black people are less civilized, no matter how much money you can give them, no matter how much praise, adulation. Given the right circumstances, they still regress. And Tyson became that model of regression. And so in a way he played into the hands of America's racism. And so I think obviously those of us who oppose racism and fight it at every turn regretted it. We looked with dismay when Tyson got into trouble because we thought he is supplying material, information, facts almost for racism. You know, it was a paradox in that sense that Tyson was a fantastic sportsman, but inadvertently, unwittingly, without knowing it, played into the hands of racists. So a very different kind of sports celebrity to Beckham in that respect.
Grazie. Un'ultima domanda. Per il XXI secolo, lei riesce già a identificare un possibile nuovo modello, un modello innovativo di celebrità sportiva? C'è qualcuno che ha in mente?
We live in interesting times, of course, because the model of the celebrity sportsman is changing. As we speak, at the moment, there is a very high-profile case in South Africa, Oscar Pistorius, of course. Half of the world thinks he's a wonderful person. He has overcome his disabilities. He has been an intense competitor. Every barrier that the world has put in front of him, he has leapt over that barrier and has overcome very difficult personal circumstances. And in many senses, people admired him greatly for this. And then he found himself at the center of a murder trial. And as we speak, we know he's been found innocent of murder. He's been cleared of that charge, but faces a charge of culpable homicide at the moment. And we don't know the outcome of this. If he's found guilty, I think a lot of people will turn against him and say that Pistorius was a man who was enjoying the fruits of a celebrity lifestyle. He wasn't tremendously rich, but he was quite affluent, comfortable, I think we'd say, and he was respected by a great many people. And a lot of people, I think, will turn against him and say that he was reckless. He abused his status because he had a gun, and he didn't use that gun in a safe and responsible manner. And I think people will form the judgment that the reason he did this is because he had a celebrity lifestyle, and like a great many other celebrities, feels that the rules are there, but they don't apply to me. Yes, there are rules, but who cares? I'm a celebrity. I do what I like. And so I think that the world will be divided when it comes to Pistorius. So maybe he's taking us into new territory. This is going to be an extremely challenging case. And I think that many people will have new opinions as a result of the Pistorius case. If I may, I would like to say a little more about Pistorius as a human being, because obviously he's a disabled guy, and at the moment we have large-scale Olympic competition and world athletic competition, and then we have Paralympic Games and Olympics that are dedicated to athletes with disabilities. Pistorius has moved from one to the other, of course. He fought hard to be accepted by the Olympic movement. At first they said you can't compete against fully abled athletes, but he managed to do that. Now I wonder if in years to come we won't have any Paralympic Games. Why? Because the athletes who have disabilities, I think, will follow Pistorius' example and say, we want to compete against abled athletes, because we don't want to have segregated games. We want to show the world that we are fully capable of competing against fully abled athletes, and not have our own games what Americans would call ghettoized, in other words, separated away from the mainstream Olympic Games and World Games and other kind of competitions. And so it could, I think, maybe in 5 or 10 years' time, be the end of Paralympic Games. We just don't need them any longer, because the athletes can compete against all athletes in an integrated game.
Grazie per queste dichiarazioni molto interessanti. Attendiamo la sua lezione sulle celebrità sportive sabato mattina a Modena. Grazie.